What's up, guys? You knew this one was coming. So on Facebook groups, on YouTube comments, Reddit, and forums, it seems like these two amps are always at each other's throats when it comes to sort of the question of which small, portable, 50-watt, 3-channel, high-gain amp is better, kind of in that $1,500 price bracket. And I think that these two are really the only two serious players if you're specifically after something small. I think that the Carvin V3M, it probably gets an honorable mention here as it fits the feature set and it can be found for under 500 bucks used, but they don't really make those amps anymore. So if you're specifically after a new amp, these two are kind of the main contenders. Now, if you don't need 50 watts, I think that the little Synergy IR20 head is probably the best option because of the incredible flexibility that you get from that modular preamp system and the built-in load box, the impulse response loader, the structure setting, the MIDI control, all that kind of stuff. It's really an impressive little unit, but at the end of the day, like I mentioned in my review for that amp, 20 watts is 20 watts and you can't beat physics. So both of these amps hit with much more punch and authority on stage than the little Synergy 20 watt amp. So depending on your use case, that amp may be a better choice than either of these two. Now, as always, I have the guys at Zzounds to thank for lending me the EVH head for a little bit to try out. And if you haven't seen my full review of the amp, you can find it somewhere up here or linked down below. It's just a killer amp, and I go into much more detail in that video than I will in this one. So if you want more information about it, go ahead and check that out. So anyways, I've got both of these going into the KHE amp switcher, and the Brothers AM pedal is up in front, so we can quickly compare both of these amps with and without the boost with one channel, both channels, kind of either or. You'll get the idea of how I have this thing set up. And also timestamps to all the different sections can be found down below, so if you want to go ahead and skip to any part of the video that you're interested in, go ahead and click down below and have at it. Both amps are going into the Universal Audio aux box with the Marshall greenback cabinet, and then into the interface over there. So anyways, we'll go ahead and get started. I got the Lizzy Hale Explorer, like always, and yeah, let's just go ahead and get going. Now, the way that I've got the clean channel on both of these amps dialed in is kind of how I've found what I think is kind of a sweet spot for the classic rock and light overdrive, edge of breakup type sounds. And basically the way it works is each of the amps, the clean channel, is kind of right around that 9 o'clock, or the 3 o'clock gain area. And what that lets you do is it lets you get, if you dig in hard, you can get it in an overdrive sound, but you can use either or both stages of the Brothers AM. Now, even though both sides are identical, I have them configured very differently so that one is a light push and the other is a much more high gain push. And because you don't have a lot of preamp gain from either of these clean channels, you can stack both of those together to get a nice full fat kind of a high gain sound. But anyways, we'll hear all of that and then we'll kind of move on to the other channels. But I just wanted to mention how I have the clean channels on these set up because I've actually started running the clean channel in the last two shows. Actually, I started it with the EVH show that I played the EVH on, and I liked it so much that at the last show I used the Kraken with the clean channel kind of cranked up, and I spent a shocking amount of time combined with that clean channel and the dual drives on the pedal. It's been a shocking amount of our show on there. So a bunch of 90s and 2000s rock, man. You'll hear what it does, but just the clean channel alone dialed in on both of these amps with a nice dual stage gain pedal like this can cover a ton of flexibility and ton of ground. So yeah, enough talking, man. Let's go ahead and hear these two amps. Okay, so as you can see, when I started using the EVH there, I did have to do a little bit of tweaking on the presence and the high-end control of that channel. Once you turn on the gain, it sort of gets a little too ice picky up top, and I had to pull it back a little bit. But with the Victory, it's a little bit more well-balanced, and I think that that's kind of the overall theme between these two amps. The EVH has the capability of the top end cutting much more aggressively, but in my opinion, for what I play, it's not beneficial in how much more it can cut. I feel like the Victory, the top end sits in sort of like this just right position where it's not too dark, but it's not too bright, and with the addition of the present shift on the back, giving you the option to kind of engage this more aggressive push around the 3 kilohertz-ish range. It has just enough flexibility with the top end that I don't feel lacking with the ability to adjust the top end ability to kind of cut through the mix and stuff like that. Whereas on this, even though you may feel like you have a lot of extra control over it, for a lot of players, unless you're into like the high gain, brutal metal type stuff, the extra top end really might not be as beneficial as you think. However, what I do think is beneficial is having the ability to have 2 different gain controls on the blue channel and the green channel, as we will see. With the Kraken, the gain channel, the clean channel, it can go higher gain than what I have it set to. However, when you switch over to the crunch channel, I don't really like the way that it sounds with the gain past kind of like right around here. That's about where I like to keep the gain maxed out on this channel because the crunch channel can get a little bit too loose and lose a little bit more definition. I mean, I'll show you what it sounds like if you're curious kind of what I'm talking about. But anyways, really like how both of these sound on their clean channel when pushed really hard and then boosted. And I've tried a couple of other boosts, but this one by far I think sounds the best with both of these amps. And I know I really don't like having to show like a expensive drive pedal, but I really want to get the best sounds possible out of these amps. And out of all the pedals that I have for this type of playing, the Brothers is just, it's the cream of the crop, rose to the top. All right, I'll quickly go back here to the Kraken and I'll crank the clean channel gain all the way up and then kind of hit it with the boost so you can hear what it sounds like just maxed out. It's a great sound maxed out, but then I'll switch over to the crunch channel and let you hear sort of where I feel like it's a bit too much. You hear how it cleaned up there? It just got a lot more defined and clean, and also gives you the ability to throw a light boost on top of that to get more saturation and a little bit more gain and cut if you want that, without going overboard and getting muddy and mushy and all that bad stuff. So yeah, keeping the gain right around here is kind of the sweet spot for that crunchy clean sound, with the ability to clean it up really nicely and still kind of stay big and loud and fat and clean on stage. However, also giving you the ability to boost it kind of into like this really great rock overdrive sound. So yeah, that's how I have started using the Kraken, and I could not be happier with how the results sound. All right, a little bit more time here on the crunch channel of the Kraken, and I will hit it with the brothers, and then we'll flip back over to the EVH. Let's flip back over to the Kraken. Let's hit the present shift back here. Make sure I hit the right one. There we go. Yeah, so as you can hear, the present shift switch on this amp can make a very powerful impact on the sound. I personally don't feel like it's needed, but it's there if you do want that extra cut. And it does sort of even the odds a little bit in some aspects with the EVH and its ability to kind of sort of infinitely adjust whatever frequency the presence control on this amp adjust. This is the button on the back is literally like an on or off switch. It's not like you can adjust it the way you can with this. But what's interesting with the Kraken is that the presence control frequency is different than the present shift control on the back. The present shift control is more, it sounds like it's a little bit more of a, like I mentioned earlier, kind of around that 3 kilohertz. It's a very prominent punch in the spectrum of sound compared to the presence. The presence knob it's not that powerful. Like a little bit added from nothing is more of a difference than sort of the whole rest of it makes. It punches a lot more using that presence shift, so if you do want the extra cut, then you would use that switch on the back. And this is more of like a kind of a gentle nudging of the top end in a different frequency. And again, in comparison, having its own gain control, it does give the EVH a little bit more flexibility, but I really like the balance, the way that both of these channels on the Kraken sound with the gain control set right about here. I can get a good crunchy clean. I can roll it back a little bit to get a big kind of sparkling clean. Each one sounds great with a boost with the gain control set here. But again, if you want something specific for each channel, then the EVH is kind of the obvious winner here. Now let's go to the lead channel of each of these amps. Now again, I'm not a death metal player, and I know a lot of you probably have tuned into this video to check out something along those lines, but I'm a 90s and 2000s rock player, because that's who I am and that's who I care about. But anyways, I will do my best to try to really push these two amps and kind of give those of you who are after kind of what do these amps sound like when doing like a ton of gain, I'll try to cater to you guys as well, but for what I play, I really don't dig too deep into the brutal high gain stuff, and there are other channels that kind of do that much better than I can, but give it the old college try here. Okay, so as you can hear, both of these amps have a ton of saturation on tap, but it's where we hear the biggest differences with the amps as well, and it sort of leads me into kind of like my own thoughts, so let's dig into that, and I will try to be as brief as I can. The EVH, it goes about business with a much more aggressive edge to the sound and the structure as well. It has a tighter overall feel and less compressed structure and a much more potent top-end cut. The Kraken, while not quite having the insane amounts of saturation on the lead channel as the EVH, as you can tell by where the gain controls were set to earlier, it has a fatter and warmer demeanor with a more forgiving structure due, I believe, kind of a little bit to the more compressed and smoother overall sound. By that I mean, on the Crunch channel, the amp has a smoothness and a compression that feels very good, and the EVH, it's a little bit more kind of direct and a little bit sharper and tighter and cleaner of the sound. The structure and that extra smoothness and kind of a little bit of the good kind of compression on the Kraken, it lends itself a little bit better to rock playing, blues, classic rock, and things like that. And also it means that you can retain that kind of feel and the flavor with a lot more gain being delivered from any boost pedal that you throw at it. And that's, in my opinion, where, for me personally, the Kraken kind of takes the lead over the EVH. Now, again, I speak from my own playing style, the music that I play, what our band plays and things like that. And for me personally, that kind of structure that the Kraken has is extremely pleasing under the fingers in terms of the way that the notes react and the way that the notes sort of kind of come off of the fretboard. It's kind of hard to describe, but you probably know what I'm talking about. But anyways, the EVH, however, if you're much more rhythm focused and you want that tighter, cleaner, instant attack to the sound, that amp, the EVH, is a better match for you, in my opinion. And the EVH is that way across all three of its channels. The Kraken is a little bit more nuanced, and that's what I found really interesting about going from the lead channel to the Crunch channel. The Crunch channel does have that nice, smoother, compressed sound, and the lead channel, as you heard, I mean, it does have a much more immediate and percussive attack to the sound, although the overall structure to that sound is still sort of rooted in a little bit more little bit more polite of a delivery of the sound, whereas the EVH is much more brash and in your face. And for a lot of players who want that more high-gained, more aggressive sound, that's what makes this a better match for that type of music. I think one other benefit to the Kraken, especially on stage, is that you have a switch that's on the back that's dedicated to the 2 volume controls. Now, that switch on the back will let you adjust how you want the Master 1 and Master 2 controls to operate. So the way that I like to use it is to have the clean and the crunch channel operating on Master 1, and Gain 2 has Master 2. In the other mode, you have all 3 channels using Master 1 as the sort of the master volume output, and then you can use your foot switch to engage Master 2 wherever you want that set for a solo boost, just to bump up the volume for lead work. So that's really handy, and it's a feature that the EVH doesn't have. And if you don't play solos, again, not an issue. The EVH, on the other hand, it has the dedicated resonance control on the back for extra low end kind of thump. However, I feel like once you go past halfway, it can sort of get a little bit too woofy in the low end. So I guess if you have a certain guitar or a certain speaker or a certain cabinet, that control can kind of let you dial in exactly how much low end you want without sort of kind of stepping into that kind of muddy territory. Also, the EVH has MIDI, so if you have an existing MIDI setup, you can easily incorporate the EVH into that, whereas with the Victory, if you do want to use MIDI, you'll need to pick up a third-party sort of TRS to MIDI controller box. They exist. There are ways to make it work, but the EVH, it works right out of the box. So for the MIDI guys who really need something to work with that, the EVH is kind of the easier option to incorporate into your existing setup. Also, for some live players, the EVH has a dedicated preamp output so that you can run a sort of a dry preamp signal into maybe your own speaker simulation, like if you have an IR loader or if you have a multi-effects unit that has impulse response built in that you're using with your effects and things like that. The EVH has that direct out that you can use in addition to using your cabinet for sort of maybe like a wet dry setup, or you can have your cabinet on stage and then run the direct out from the EVH into some sort of speaker emulation, then to the PA for a nice clean direct sound. Whereas on the Kraken, you will need some sort of load box with a line out, like the hot plate that I use on stage with this thing. So the hot plate's nice because I can use the line out headed to the quad cortex for the IRs and the effects for the wet sound, and then I'll send the speaker out of the hot plate into whatever cabinet I'm playing on stage, and I can use the attenuator control to make sure that the stage volume is just right, and I can use the line out volume or the level on the quad cortex to adjust the wet volume. So it's a very flexible setup with a very simple, old school, but still perfectly functioning type of load box. Okay, time for a conclusion. Both amps deliver a ton of gain. Both amps come in pretty affordable with price tags, and both amps are relatively portable, although despite the EVH being a pretty compact unit, the Kraken is literally like about a third of the size, and it comes with this nice kind of padded carrying case. It's this guy right here. So really handy. So the Kraken, I believe, it wins the portability points. Now, personally, I think that the Kraken has a better structure and feel for just about everything that isn't thrash or death metal. So if you don't play those types of sounds, those styles of music, I think that the Kraken is the better of the two amps. The tighter and less compressed sound and more potent top-end cut of the EVH, it really does lend itself better to the higher gain stuff. So price and physical size and other features aside, I think that that's the big bullet point comparison for these two amps. Anyways, thanks for hanging out with me on this comparison. I know it kind of went a little bit long, and I really didn't intend to play a lot, but honestly, both of these amps they make me not want to stop playing. And to be honest, it's kind of the highest level of praise that you can give an amp or a guitar. When you get an amp and you don't want to stop playing, then you know you've got something special. And for me, both of these amps deliver that. Like, they are extremely fun to play. And, you know, if you've got either one of these already, or if you've actually played one of these, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. Another big thanks to the guys at Zzounds for lending me the EVH to try out and bring you this comparison, the review, spend some time on stage with it. It was awesome on stage. Had a blast with it. So yeah, it gets the seal of approval for the 90s and 2000s rock easily. So great stage amp, great studio amp, both of them just incredible amps. It's very hard to pick, in my opinion. If you want to grab either of these amps, I will have affiliate links down there in the description to both of these amps, the guitar, all the stuff that I use to make this video happen. And again, I don't get paid for these reviews. So if you want to help support the work that I do here on the channel, use those links down below to literally purchase anything on their website, and it doesn't cost you guys anything extra. But again, it's always appreciated from me. If you're not subscribed and you enjoyed the video, you can help support my channel as well by just hitting the subscribe button, hitting the like button, maybe sharing it to someone who might be interested in either of these amps, and just to kind of help get these videos out there to more new viewers just like yourself. Last but not least, I have got some great sounding neural DSP and Tonex captures of the EVH and many more amps that I have reviewed on the channel. I still haven't gotten a chance to capture the Kraken yet. I'll get there eventually, but the ones that I only have temporarily, those do kind of take precedent. And each of those capture packs has about a dozen built-in captures, both the Oxbox Finish 30, greenback cab, as well as direct captures so that you can use whatever impulses you want. And again, you can email me for those. For now, I'm slowly but surely trying to build my website to make all of this easier to do, but that takes time. And between my real job and doing these videos, making the actual captures and doing the whole family man thing, the website's kind of been on the back burner. I may end up just paying somebody for that. I don't know. Anyways, 10 bucks for a pack. That's probably less than $1 per capture. I'm not really sure. Maybe some of you math nerds can check the numbers on that. I will be back soon with a very cool high gain hand-built boutique amp, so definitely stay tuned for that one, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take care.